around the same time, Matt Kenseth wins one race, Ryan Newman wins 8 in the same season, and Matt wins a championship.
Yeah.
So that, in a lot of people's mind, is what sort of spurred on this idea that we have to have a different point system or a different way to decide the champion. Was that really what got the ball rolling for that sparked it in the industry's mind that, man, we need to do something different here?
Well, it was certainly a big.
Had y'all been talking about like changing the system somewhat to where we had a playoff atmosphere for some time?
Well, look, go back to what I originally said. Everything I'm trying to do and we're trying to do is to create big moments to move the sport to more people and further distances. That's what we're trying to do. What accomplishes that? Well, the first thing that accomplishes that is give drivers a moment on a bigger stage where there's more on the line, where it can happen right now, okay? Not evolve and maybe you get a big moment, maybe you don't. You know, you're not getting a big moment like you had over the weekend with Ross Chastain. Had we not had this, you're not getting that moment.
Yeah.
And one thing that I'm, proud about with the teams and the drivers is they used to say, I'm giving everything I can give. It doesn't matter what is on the line. Well, that's not true. It's not true because they have dug, and it's cool to watch, truthfully. They're digging deeper. They're doing stuff that you go, wow, and that's what gives you a chance. Now remember something else. I'm trying to take this thing to a bigger place, grow the pie for everyone. But while we're doing that, and this is the case, for Jim and others, when you're not doing those things, your competitors are. College football is doing great now. They're having a big moment. Other leagues they're all well promoted. They're well entrenched in our traditions, and they're getting star power. They're changing some of their stuff around. Their TV packages are bigger and better. So it's not enough to say, if we're just trying to be another auto racing series, there's 30 or 40 of them around the country. Mm-hmm. If we're trying to make drivers household names or create big opportunities or have big events, then you got to figure out what are all the things that are necessary to compete and do those things. At least give yourself an opportunity. That doesn't mean that it's all going to happen just because you create the opportunities. You still have to have stars. You still have to get the racing right. It has to be safe. It has to be competitive. The networks have to do their part. There's a lot that has to happen that has to come together. But you got to give yourself an opportunity to let that happen.
The only thing that I really ever struggled with, and you're right about that. Ross Chastain doesn't do what he does at Martinsville without a playoff atmosphere and that elimination moment. Those moments aren't created in a traditional format that we've used for decades without a playoff system. So I like the playoffs, but the only thing that I've kind of struggled with is how we expanded the playoff field. Mm-hmm. When it was, and it's happened at the Clash as well, like the eligibility for getting into the Clash changed the identity of that race. When the chase was 10 drivers, it was like, damn, that's hard. That's hard to get into. It's 16 now, which is almost half the field of the most of the guys that run every single week. We've seen, to your point, though, we've seen other series, other sports expand their playoff fields as well. Because the more people you have involved in the playoffs, the more entities that are plugged in and interested, sponsors that are part of it. I feel like that was kind of the push for the Clash was like you'd have partners coming up and going, why aren't we in this race? Why can't we be in this race? So I understand the pressure there, but so I never loved the fact that the chase field grew, but because I felt like it really made it difficult to get into, and something about it being that difficult when it was limited to 10 or even 12, something about it being harder made it more prestigious or more powerful. The moment's more powerful, right?
Well, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
But remember, when we're doing that, we're also looking at the other leagues.
Yeah.
And so I think the NBA's got, I want to say 16 or 18 teams.
They
something
grew,
like
and they've all grown.
They've all grown. And so we're proportioned to, a 40-car starting field. We fit in that regard. So
the other thing that I've struggled with is figuring out, okay, if we like the playoff system, we like the 3-race round. I think it's compelling. It could be argued that it's relatively fair. Everybody's got the same opportunity. It's 3 races. You can kind of dig yourself out of a hole. But I've always kind of struggled with the final race being all or nothing.
Yeah.
And the reason why I struggle with that is because, the venue may suit a team or a driver. You obviously would probably, I don't want to say never, but you would never consider running it at a road course or a super speedway, because that track certainly suits some drivers more than others, and you try to have it at a neutral facility, if you will, like a Homestead or a Phoenix. But I always had a hard time with saying, okay, it's all boiled down to this one day where you've got to get it right, and if you don't, you're not a champion today or this year. Even though you've really, got this amazing body of work, you can still have that guy that wins one race be the champion, and the guy that won 6 not even make the final round. And so I wish that we could figure out a way to make that championship moment not a all or nothing 3-hour affair. You know what I mean? We're going to decide the champion in 3 hours on Sunday. It's one race, and if a bolt falls off, too bad.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of struggled with that. I've really warmed up to everything else that we've done. It took me a long time because I was too much of a traditionalist, but I still feel like there's got to be a better scenario for the final moment.
Well, the reason you feel that way is because those are fair points that you make. They are. And the amount of hours led by Steve O'Donnell that go into that kind of decision, and all of those points are made by a guy like Mike Helton. He'll make those points, and others will make them. I'll make them too. I'll agree with them. And where you end up with that is that's part of the challenge of a playoff format in general with auto racing.
Yeah.
And you're just going to have to accept that that's not exactly perfect. Where the other leagues play on a 100-yard field and a basketball court, and it's the same basketball, and there's that never enters into the discussion.
Yeah.
But with auto racing, golf to some degree, plays into that.
Sure.
Some courses fit, a golfer different than others, and longer, drives and all that stuff. But that's fair. But you can't, unfortunately, at least that was my decision, was that we're not going to hold ourselves back from getting those moments because auto racing doesn't quite fit perfectly into that.
Yeah.
We just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
That was the judgment.
And it probably, even if you tried to, I'm sure there's a lot of scenarios that y'all ran through to try to come up with other alternatives. It's still going to come down to the final race. Every round does, right? Every round comes down to what we had at Martinsville. And so even if you said, all right, the final round between the 4 drivers is 3 races, that last race is still going to be one way things get decided. So I don't know how you could go another route than we have.
Or if something breaks, you just said it. If something breaks on the car, and it comes down to that, you know, what's the great term? That's racing.
I know. I always I kind of struggle sometimes with the guy that's running second. He's 10 car lengths away. Going into 3, he sees the championship right in front of him, and he came so damn close. I guess that's as a driver, we had gotten so seasoned and comfortable with, we're going to run the whole year, and I'm going to know pretty much where I am in this championship thing before we even get close to the end.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? And it's kind of, I'm going to know whether I'm in or out of it, and I'm going to have several weeks to really come to terms with that, and then get my head wrapped around trying again next year. What we have now is definitely more akin to what you see in other sports, where it comes down to the final second of the game. It comes down to the final, the final drive. And there is elation and there is massive heartbreak that we really never experienced in a championship format that often until we have it. Now what the drivers go through emotionally, I've lived it, but talking to the drivers today, they never ever feel this level of intensity, anger, frustration, heartbreak, elation, happiness, joy. They never have felt it in their lives until they find themselves in the playoffs. And so, maybe there's something to be said about this.
There was conventional wisdom by all teams that we're going as hard as we go, and we're going to do as best, And the first time we did that in Homestead, and it remained this way. The top four guys were usually you had to win the race to win the championship, and the four contenders were at the front on a 1.5-mile track. Were almost always in the top 10, top 5 even.
Yeah.
That's
right? And that told me, I remember going down to see Mike about the second year into the chase, and I went, that's not true. These guys are now, there's more on the line, and they're doing something different, pushing themselves to a place that they didn't think they could push. Mm-hmm. Tony Stewart's epic run back when he won the championship. And I said to our team, I said, the cool thing about this is, over time, we're going to see things that make NASCAR because of the heroic of what drivers are able to do. Like, I don't know, but the Ross Chastain was a incredible thing, but there are many, many others where risk taking, just the skill that you don't. It's hard, and that's the other inherent challenge in auto racing. Is we know that people who love racing get that, and they get a lot of everything in between, but they don't. The more we can show a casual fan something that, like, you got to be really, you're the best driver in the world to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. That right there, to win 3 in a row, 4 in a row, that people go, I may not even be a big, huge auto racing fan, but I respect it. I like that. That's what we're after. We're trying to pull that person in to take a look. Well, let's spend some time watching. But we're doing that, and this is what happens that I had to challenge my team all the time, because we can get in a real vacuum in Daytona. We can be in Daytona, and we think, that we are the number one auto racing by a lot in this country, and not think through as much that there is the other leagues, they are doing these things. They are making their product safer, better. They are taking it to more people. They are making their stadiums bigger, their fan experience better. See, that's all happening around you. So you don't really have, once you make that decision that we're gonna be a major franchise sport in this country. Once you make that deal, be careful what you ask for, because it requires you to do a lot of things that, if you're the NHRA, not or many other series, they're not going to have to worry about some of those things, making some of those decisions, those risks, those expansions or whatever. They don't have to do that, and that's what makes NASCAR great. It also makes it difficult to manage, right? To get everything right, because there's a lot on the line.
Can I just add two things on all this to Dale's points about the playoff system? One is I don't think anybody's ever thought that it was a perfected science, certainly, and that's just not in racing, that's in every sport, which I don't think that this is too dissimilar from other sports. You can easily have a wild card NFL team catch, momentum and get hot at that time and sail all the way to the Super Bowl, whereas the, undefeated regular season team gets beat in a divisional playoff or something like that. That's all still possible and likely. The other thing I wanted to ask you, going back to his point before that about the expansion of the field, is it not true that the expansion from 10 to 12 and then therefore was because it increased the chance of getting your stars into the playoffs, to which Dale was one of them?
Sure.
I remember the year, it might have been the 2005 or 6, Jeff Gordon and Dale Jr. were both at risk of not making the field. And if I remember it correctly, the field expanded right after that, because I don't think either one of them made it.
Well, we don't do it for one driver, of course, but the idea that you say to get to not leave somebody out in a given year, sure. But here's what breaks the tie internally at NASCAR is how do we stack up with other playoff formats and other do we have too many? Is it 50% of the field of the teams in the NFL go to the playoffs? Is it 40? Is it 30? We're right in a good spot. We're right where everybody else is. We're not overloaded where the whole field goes in and that kind of thing. We're in a good place, but so that allowed us to expand it. But sure, look, everything you're thinking that happens if you're trying to grow the pie, well, why would they do that? You bet we're going to put that on the table. It still has to pass the litmus test of being equitable and reasonable and fair and balance and traditions. But we're taking all of that stuff and putting that on the table, and that's what gives me the optimism about what's happening now. Even though there may be some bumps in the road with NASCAR, they think that way. They're thinking all the time about how do we get this right for everyone, and starting with the product on the track, and I think they've done a really good job and. With the new car, I know there's always some things they're trying to improve, but compared to how on my watch that they've done an incredible job through COVID and all the things, gives me a lot of optimism that the sports and my uncle's doing a great job and Steve Phelps, they're all doing a really good job.
If you like that conversation with Brian France, you can listen to the whole podcast because it's all available on every podcast platform.